I was in Tempe, Arizona yesterday afternoon. I'm talking to Dusty Dvorak, longtime Sooner great, and we're talking about everything other than Alabama, Oklahoma. And then a few hours later, we're flying home, and Alabama's going down. And I'm watching it, as I tend to always do, these Alabama upsets from like 36,000 feet. I don't know what it is about this string of me watching Bama lose while I'm flying. 24-3, the final here. Oklahoma did it, man. Two Chalai. I gave it 2 Chalai on the rating scale. If that means anything to you, I got to be real with you for a second. Bipolar disease is very serious. I don't have any friends who are bipolar. I've never dealt with that firsthand. I don't have family members who are bipolar, but man, I've watched Alabama football. So I kind of get a sense of what it's like. That team is impossible to predict because it is so quarterback centric. It is so dependent on which version of number 4 shows up. It's not even a home and road thing. You would think, oh, they're just bad on the road. They're good at home. Nah, man. They ripped LSU spine out in Death Valley a few weeks ago. I know. I was there. But we don't talk about the losers first on this show. We talk about the winners. And Jackson Arnold in Oklahoma showed up yesterday and said, you know, we may not have a record to write home about, but the whole point of this thing is to score points, right? By any means necessary. So as an offense, as it turns out, they didn't need to do anything. The defense was going to outscore Alabama on its own. But as an offense, we don't know that going into a game. So we want to move the ball. How do we move the ball down the field? Could be through the air. If you're a quarterback, you would love to do it that way. But I'll tell you, you could also just pass for 68 yards and still win comfortably. And the way you do that is to just put the passing game on hold for a night. If you can run the ball to the tune of, 250 yards against Alabama, then do it. By all means, do it. Jackson Arnold himself had 131 on the ground, and there was no answer. Alabama has no answer. And then you watch it start, and like me, you're probably sitting there thinking, all right, bad first half, but let's see, how many points will they need to win? I always play that game in my head when a favorite is down. I was doing it with Ole Miss yesterday. When a favorite is down early, how many points do I think they're going to need to come back and win this game? Well, that talking point quickly dissipated in my mind. I'll talk about this later because it really wraps into this whole SEC mushroom cloud that appeared over the entire conference yesterday. But to watch Oklahoma, to think about the talk that's been around Brent Venables at various points this year, the offense has been terrible. They fired the offensive coordinator. It just, again, it goes to show you, I probably need to practice a little better discipline on this. You just have to wait to the end of the season to judge these guys. You can get so caught up in the week to week, even the half to half. If you're hanging out on message boards, and there are a million and one things moving behind the scenes. And Oklahoma, I don't know. I heard some people calling it a signature win, a program-defining win. I think Alabama's getting a lot of grace for what Nick Saban did there and not so much acknowledgement that this year's team's just not elite by any stretch of the imagination. I know it means a lot to beat that brand, but, a few teams have done it already this year. I don't want to take anything away from Oklahoma. I'm just saying it was a very good win. It was a much-needed win. They secure their bowl trip, so they've got that streak still going for them. But on the other side, what do you make of Alabama? Big question around the old water cooler today. What do you make of Alabama? Jalen Milroe's the entire picture for that team this year. As he goes, they go. I think most folks who watch Alabama have realized that. And the Georgia and LSU and Wisconsin versions of him were really good. But we also live in a world where the Tennessee version showed up, and the Vanderbilt version showed up, and the Oklahoma version showed up last night. Do you realize, paper popper of a stat here, do you realize in Alabama's 3 losses, Milroe has 28 rushing yards? Not average, combined. He has 28 rushing yards in those 3 losses. We had to double-check that. I thought it was a typo. I thought producer Jesse was lying to me, and he wasn't. Running backs, again, nothing to write home about. 15 carries, 63 yards. It's just the identity you think that team should have. The identity I think that team should have. For whatever reason, it does not have it consistently enough. There will be games like LSU that fool you into thinking they've turned a corner. And because it's Alabama, they still get benefit of the doubt in your mind, but they're bipolar. It is a bipolar football team. And they could lose to Auburn by 20 this coming Saturday. They could beat Auburn by 20 Saturday. And I'd look at either result and go, that tracks. Yeah, that makes sense. speaking of making sense, a lot of talk turned up again on Kalen DeBoer and the whole year one experiment and what will Alabama be long term under Kalen DeBoer. So I'm on record and still am on record as saying I think he'll be a winner there for a long time. But a lot of people either disagree with that or they don't share my enthusiasm in that vein. Because there are a lot of stats floating around today about how Alabama's already done multiple times this year, what they only did a few times in the entirety of Nick Saban's career and all that. I think from 50,000 feet, that makes sense. From 50,000 feet, if you look at the way Saban exited, it was a little bit later in the cycle, and then you had to go get a guy, and he had to fill out his staff, and then his OC and his offensive line coach left after he hired them, so then he had to backfill for those positions. The portal cost them guys like Caleb Downs. They had to basically hold it together as best they could. It stands to reason from 50,000 feet that a guy like that may incur some bumps in the road, right? But that's not how we watch this game. It's not how we observe this game. It's not how I observe the game. So then you get sucked in, really good vibes, and then they turn in some performances that give you a little bit of confidence. But all the while, it feels like there's a little something missing. Now, you've been conditioned to watch Nick Saban's Alabama, and so you feel a little something's missing. But I also felt like that thing was missing from the last few Nick Saban teams. So it's not strictly a DeBoer thing. Like, I thought the raw, animalistic killer instinct that program exemplified for the better part of 15 years started to wane a little bit. Still the most talented team in the country towards the end of Saban's run, still right there in the college football playoff mix and in the national title mix. They won the SEC his last year there. The program didn't fall off, but relative to the standard they had set, I didn't feel like the killer instinct was there the last few years. They were a lot more penalty prone, just self-inflicted stuff, wild swings in performance, defensive lapses. Those things crept in a little bit towards the end of Nick Saban's tenure. So that's just the kind of stuff that's had the volume turned up on it a little bit in year one under Kalen DeBoer. That dude knows how to win. The same stuff wins that has always won. There's a coach that's pretty legendary in his own right that used to roam the sidelines at Alabama that is famous for saying stuff like that. He said it in the 70s. It's still true in the 2020s. You got to trust that you know what you're doing. And you probably don't get hired at Alabama, at least in the modern day, if you don't know what you're doing as head coach. So Kalen DeBoer is going to have 1,000,001 people throw ideas and suggestions at him. I am not suggesting he's running Alabama perfectly, and I actually, to the contrary, do expect there to be some staff churn there, but you could have called that shot in the spring. How many coaches do you see take over any program, and especially in a situation like him where you have to hastily throw everything together and then they just nail everything? Hardly anyone does that, and that's generically speaking. So specifically to Alabama and Kalen DeBoer, yeah, sure, he'll have to make changes. What I wonder is when I watch them, like Tyler Booker's the kind of player that if I multiplied his attitude, then you got the kind of killer instinct as a team I'm talking about. It's not to question anyone's competitiveness. I actually don't think they've mailed in the season at all. They look like they play hard. It's just so wildly inconsistent, and it's an intangible thing. There is nothing on paper that I can show you. I cannot quantify what I'm talking about, but everyone who's been around it or has watched it understands when a team has it. Most of them don't. Most of them don't ever get to that level, but there is an intangible, there's an there is a killer instinct. When you have it, it really stands out. And when you have it, stuff like last night doesn't happen. All due respect to Oklahoma, stuff like that doesn't happen. But this is not a vintage Alabama team. It's a good Alabama team, but a very bipolar and flawed Alabama team. And so you either finish with, what do they got? 3 losses now, Jesse, right? So they either finish 9-3 or 8-4 if they lose the Iron Bowl, which is its own set of issues if they do that. It's just, I think 2 years from now, wherever they are, they'll probably look back and whether they make the playoff or in all likelihood miss the playoff, I would lean towards miss, obviously. They probably find themselves saying, in retrospect, I'm glad this happened or that happened. It sucks to go through it in the meantime. I know, guys, it sucks. Got a lot of you watching, by the way. I appreciate it, coming to take your medicine. Make sure you subscribe to the channel while you're here because that is how we keep the show free. That's what we do. That's all we do. College football all year round and nothing else. Candidly, probably won't talk about the NBA Finals on this channel. But spring football, you're in the right place. just subscribe to the channel so we can keep it free.